Alright, today we're going to go over the 1.3 homework. It starts on page 21, goes to 23. Its numbers 1, then 2 to 66 even. Remember in class we broke it up as two parts, so the first part was 1, 2 to 24 even, and 12 and 24 were your accuracy problems. And then part 2, it's going to be 26 to 66 even. There will be two accuracy problems. You'll have to hopefully catch the mistakes in the video. Alright, so for most of part 1, you're going to have to know how to factor a trinomial. So step 1 is you write the factors of the first term. So you just take the first term. It's usually the easiest part. Step 2, write down the factors of the last term. Knowing about the signs is really important there. And step 3 is you check the middle using FOIL. Hopefully, if you use x squared, you remember the adding shortcut. So if it begins with an x squared and there's no number besides x squared up there, then you can use that adding shortcut and it'll save you a whole bunch of time. Alright, number 1 says, what is the zero of the function y equals f of x? Now, the easiest way to say that is any x value that makes y equals 0. So that's the easiest one. You could also say in intercept form. And we like intercept form right now because that's what's going to be happening a lot. Is we're going to make intercept form show up. P and Q are zeros. Or you could say x-intercepts are also 0. All those are true. Alright, so that's it for number 1. Alright, number 2 says, explain the difference between a monomial, binomial, and a trinomial. So the number of terms is the difference. A monomial has one term, like x squared, or 7, or negative 5x. A binomial is two terms, like x squared plus 4, or x minus 7, or y plus x. A trinomial is three terms, like x squared plus 2x plus 7, or x to the 6th plus 7y plus 3, or x plus y plus z. All those are different examples. That's it for 2. Alright, 4 says I have x squared minus 7x plus 10. So step 1 is you have to write the factors of the first term. So how do I get x squared? X times x. It's the only way to get x squared. Now how do I get positive 10? So because it's positive 10, I have 1 and 10. I also have 2 and 5. Because that's negative there, I need to know that I also could have negative 1 and negative 10 give me positive, multiply to give me positive 10, or negative 2 and negative 5. Now the adding shortcut is I add these up, 11, 7, negative 11, negative 7, and I see which one matches the middle. This one matches the middle, so when I make my parentheses, I have x minus 2, x minus 5. So that's your answer. You can always FOIL to check your work, and that's it for 4. 6, r squared. How do I get r squared? R and r. So I already know I'm going to have two sets of parentheses with r and r. Now how do I get 56? 1 and 56, 2 and 28, 4 and 14, and 7 and 8. 7 and 8 adds up to be 15, so I put r plus 7, r plus 8, and I'm done. And that's it. If you want to check the middle using FOIL, you just have to refoil it. R times r is r squared. R times 8 is 8r. 7 times r is plus 7r. 7 times 8 is plus 56. 7r and 8r are 15r. So that's good. That's it for 6. Alright, number 8. I have q squared minus 11q plus 28. How do I get q squared? Q and q. How do I get 28? 1 and 28. 2 and 14, 4 and 7. Now, if I don't want to write all the negatives, I don't have to, because I have 4 and 7 equals 11. If I ever get the right number, but the wrong sign, I just take that 4 and 7 and I write minus 4. and minus 7. And I get Q and Q from earlier. And there we go. We're done. That's it. Remember, that plus sign tells me I must have matching signs here. Either they both better be negative or they both better be positive. Alright? That's it for 8. Alright, I have x squared minus 4x minus 12. Right away, x and x is very easy. Because it's x squared, it tells me I can use my shortcut, so I know I have x and x. Now, how do I get negative 12? Because it's negative, I must have opposite signs. That means I better have plus and minus or minus and plus. I'm going to write minus 1 and 12, minus 2 and 6, minus 3 and 4. You can, if you really wanted to, write out 1 and negative 12, 2 and negative 6, or 3 and negative 4, and have all the options. I just don't like writing all those out. I add them up. It looks like negative 6 and 2 is negative 4, like I want. So I put plus 2, minus 6. Now, if you would have used this one, I would have got positive 4. And it would have just told me to change both signs. I would have changed negative 2 to a positive 2, positive 6 to a negative 6. So either way, I would have got the same answer. And that's it for 10. Alright, 12 is an accuracy problem, so I'm not going to do that one for you. So I have m squared plus 8m minus 65. Step 1, how do I get m squared? M and n. So I already know I'm going to have m here and m there. Now, remember, that negative sign tells me they have to be opposite signs. So I'm going to have negative 1 and 65. 2 doesn't work, 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work. I get negative 5 and 13. Negative 5 and 13 adds up to be 8. So I'm good to go. So I write minus 5 plus 13. Done. And that's it for 14. Alright, so the next part of this assignment talks about special patterns. I call it perfect square shortcuts. So you have to know your perfect squares. That's why we're going to have a time test over perfect squares. So special patterns. The easiest ones is the difference of two squares. So remember, that is when you have a perfect square minus another perfect square, you write it as a minus b, or a plus b, doesn't matter the order, a minus b. So if you can write it with two little 2's and it has a minus sign in the middle, you can write it as 2 sets of parentheses. Alright? Now, there are other options. We have perfect square trinomials. So it's a little bit different. It's a trinomial. And if you don't like this, you can still use your older, step 1, step 2, and step 3, where you break down the terms. But if you could write it as a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, then you can just write it as a plus b squared. And if you change that to a minus sign, a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, you can put a minus b squared. Right? So those are going to come up in this next set. So 16 is b squared minus 81. So hopefully you know that 9 squared is 81. So I'm going to rewrite this. So I have b squared minus 9 squared. Now it kind of looks like my a squared minus b squared, where I have an a and a b. So I can break it down as b plus 9, b minus 9. If you want to refoil to check your work, you're allowed to do that. It will totally work. Alright, so 18, this one's a trinomial, because it's got 3 terms. So I gotta hope I know that 64 is perfect. 64 is perfect. So hopefully you know that 8 squared is 64. So I'm going to rewrite it as t squared minus 16t plus 8 squared. So now I have an a and I have a b. So if the middle, remember, because we have a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. So if the middle is minus 2 times a times b, or minus 2 times 8 times t, which is minus 16t, since the middles match, I can just say this is t plus 8 squared. Now, if you didn't do it that way and you broke it down just like we did before, where 8 and 8 gives me 64, and I wrote it as t plus 8, or actually it should have been t minus 8 anyhow. If you wrote it as t minus 8, that's the same thing. So either one of these, this with the little 2, if you forget the little 2, then that's wrong, or 2 sets of parentheses, t minus 8, t minus 8. Alright, so number 20, I have c squared plus 28c plus 196. Hopefully, right away you understand 196 is 14 squared. So I'm going to rewrite it as c squared plus 28c plus 14 squared. So there's my a, and there's my b. So if my middle is 2 times 14 times c, which is 28c, if those match, which they do, I can write this as c plus 14 and just put a little 2 there, and that's my answer. If you don't like that, you can just break down the first term. How do I get c squared? C and c. How do I get 196? 14 and 14, and that does that to be 28, so I put c plus 14, c plus 14. See how either one of these give you the same answer? So it doesn't matter which one you pick. And that's it for 20. Alright, 22. It's a perfect square, S and S. 169 is also a perfect square of 13 and 13. If they're both negative, it adds up to negative 26, so I write it as S minus 13. S minus 13. That's it. Alright, starting with number 24, we have to solve the equation. Alright, so whenever you solve it, you have to follow these steps. So step 1 is you have to make sure that it's equal to 0. If you don't see equal to 0, you cannot solve this. You cannot solve using this method. After it's equal to 0, you're going to factor, just like that equal to 0 wasn't there. So sometimes you might factor like it's a trinomial. Maybe use the difference of perfect squares, or maybe you factor out a common term. Step 3, once you factor it, you set each part equal to 0. Usually those are sets of parentheses, but sometimes they're just factors. And then you use Pattens backwards to solve. Alright, 24 is an accuracy problem, so you're going to have to do that one on your own. If you get stuck on it, follow along with 26. It's the exact same step-by-step process. Alright, 26. First thing I'm going to do is see if it's equal to 0. So since it's set equal to 0 already, I factor first. So I just pretend that equal to 0 is not there, and I say, how do I get x squared? X and x. How do I get negative 35? So remember, that negative sign tells me those signs better be opposite. So I have negative 1 and 35. I have negative 5 and 7. Negative 5 and 7 add up to be positive 2. So I rewrite it as x minus 5, x plus 7 is equal to 0. Now that it's factored, I have to set each parenthesis equal to 0. So I'm going to say x minus 5 equals 0, or x plus 7 could equal 0. Now I have two equations that are very easy to solve. I add 5 to both sides. My first answer is x equals 5. I have another answer. That's why it says or there. I could have two answers. X minus 7. I minus 7 both sides. I get x equals negative 7. And that's it for 26. Done. Alright, 28. Right away, it's set equal to 0. So since it's set equal to 0, I can go right into my factoring. So how do I get b squared? B and b. How do I get 9? 1 and 9, 3 and 3. I like 3 and 3 because it equals 6. Remember, I want negative 6. So I rewrite it as b minus 3. B minus 3 equals 0. Now I set each one of these parentheses equal to 0. So I say b minus 3 equals 0, or b minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides, b equals 3. Add 3 to both sides. You don't even have to do this one if you don't want, but if you want to, you can. Add 3 to both sides, b equals 3 again. So there is only one solution. It's just b equals 3. And that's it. Alright, number 30 is a little bit different because I have n squared minus 6n. I have two terms instead of 3. So I can't use my perfect square trinomial. I'm going to hope there's something in common. So I'm going to factor out the common term. So I'm going to look at the left side and I'm going to say, look, they both have an n in common. Remember, n squared is n times n. So I'm going to take one n away from both of them. I'm going to take this n away and this n away. I'm going to bring it to the outside. So those two n's are going to come outside a set of parentheses. It's like undoing the order of the distributive property. So those are outside, so they don't have to take care of. I'm left with n minus 6. Now, it's already equal to 0, so I set each factor or parentheses. This is a factor because it's something times something. So I say n equals 0 as my first answer, and minus 6 as my second answer, equals 0. Now, the first one's already solved. I have to add 6 to both sides, so my second answer is n equals 6. And that's it. I'm done. All right, I have w squared minus 16w plus 48 equals to 0. Step 1, set it equal to 0. It's already done. So now I say, how do I get w squared? W and w. That's why I have w, and that's why I have w. How do I get 48? I have 1 and 48. I have 2 and 24. I have 3 and 16. I have 4 and 12. And I stop right away at 4 and 12 because 4 plus 12 is 16. Remember, I have negative 16, so I make it minus 4, minus 12. And look, the equal to 0 just drops down. Now I have two sets of parentheses equal to 0, so I get to say w minus 4 equals 0, or w minus 12 equals 0. Add 4 to both sides. I get my first answer as w equals 4. Add 12 to both sides. I get my second answer as w equals 12. Done. That's it for 32. 34, I have r squared plus 2r equals 80. All right. They both have an r in common, so I say r plus 2 equals 80. Now I'm going to say r equals 80 or r plus 2 equals 80. So my second answer is r equals 78, because I have to subtract 2 from both sides. And that's it for 34. All right, so 36. Ask myself at first, is it set equal to 0? It's not. It's equal to 7m. So I have to get the 7m away. Now remember, somebody's going to mess up here. These are not like terms. So when I write this next line, it's just m squared minus 7m equals 0, because those cancel each other out. Now it kind of looks like 30, where they both have an m in common. So I take that m squared. Remember, that's m and m. One of the m's goes out here. This m goes out here because they both have it in common. And I'm left with m minus 7 equals 0. So m equals 0 or m minus 7 equals 0. There's one answer. Or I add 7 to both sides. M equals 7 is my second answer. And that's it for 36. 38. Remember, it has to be set equal to 0. It's not set equal to 0. I never move y squared. So I'm going to leave that y squared alone. I'm going to add 3y to both sides. I'm going to subtract 28 to both sides. So I'm going to make the left side equal to 0. I'm going to get 0 equals y squared plus 3y minus 28. Now remember, it's a minus 28, so I have to break down the factors: minus 1 and 28, minus 2 and 14, minus 4 and 7. If I use minus 4 and 7, it works. I get 0 equals y minus 4, y plus 7. I'm only allowed to do this next step if it equals 0. If it doesn't equal 0, I can't do this. So I say y minus 4 equals 0, or y plus 7 equals 0. I add 4 to both sides, I get y equals 4 as my first answer. I subtract 7 to both sides, I get y equals negative 7 as my second answer. And that's it. Alright, in 40, they did not set equal to 0 first. That's the book's mistake. So the first thing you have to do is you have to minus 14 from both sides. So you are not allowed to break down the way they did. So I have to write it as x squared plus 7x minus 8 equals 0. Now when I factor it, negative 1 and positive 8 will add it to be positive 7. So this factors to x minus 1, x plus 8 equals 0. Remember, if you didn't remember, I factored the first term, x and x. Now, because it's equal to 0, I get to say x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 8 equals 0. So I add 1 to both sides. I get x equals 1 as my first answer. I subtract 8 from both sides. X equals negative 8 as my second answer. And that's it for 40. All right, in 42, they're talking about a rectangular picnic site, and it measures 24 by 10, which means the area on the inside is 240 feet, so it's square feet. Now, they want to double this area. So the original area is 240. They want the new area to double that, or 480. So they want something to equal 480. Now, what they want to do is they want to add the same amount on both sides, and they want it to double it. So they're going to make a bigger rectangle. They're going to keep the ratio the same, so they want to add the same amount on both sides. We're going to call that x. So the new area is actually going to be, add those two together, x plus 10, times the other side, x plus 24. And 42, all they want to know is an equation, so you're done. You don't have to solve it in this problem. And that's it for 42. All right, so in 44 to 54, they are giving you the problem in standard form. They want you to change it to intercept form. So all you have to do is factor, write it in intercept form, and I want you to find A, P, and Q. And A for all of them are going to be 1, so it's going to be super easy. So 44, I have y equals x squared plus 6x plus 8. So remember, just pretend the y is not there, and it looks just like part 1, where I say, how do I get 8? Well, 1 and 8, or 2 and 4. 2 and 4 add to be 6, so I rewrite it as y equals, and how'd you get x squared? X and x. X plus 2, x plus 4. Now, just to finish this up, this is now intercept form. A is 1, P is negative 2, Q is negative 4. All right. The reason they want you to do this is they want you to understand that P and Q is the same thing if I set it equal to 0 and told you to find zeros. All right. So that's it for 44. All right, 46, x squared minus 4x minus 32. Remember, the y is just hanging out, so I know the y is going to drop down. Now, how do I get negative 32? Negative 1 and 32. Negative 2 and 16. Negative 3 doesn't work. Negative 4 and 8. And I stop because negative 4 and 8 gives me 4. Now, because I want negative 4, I rewrite this. Instead of negative 4, I put plus 4. Instead of positive 8, I put minus 8. And then when I find my Q root, A is 1. Remember, we don't trust anybody hanging out with our x for P. Q is positive 8. That's it for 46. All right, 48 is a little more difficult because it has f of x. Remember, if you don't like f of x, just scribble out and write y. Also, because there's two terms, which means you have to find something in common. So, or you can just add a 0 at the end. Either or is fine with me. I like to find something in common. So, remember that f of x is just going to drop down. And I say, look, they both have an x in common. X in common. So I put that x on the outside. And I'm going to write x plus 11 on the inside, because if I distributed that, it would go back to this. Now remember, you can think of this as x plus 0, x plus 11. So P, remember A is 1, that's easy. P is actually 0. And Q is actually negative 11. All right, that's it for 48. All right, 50. Another problem that's a little bit different because it's got two terms, but there's nothing in common. So I gotta hope that I have perfect squares. X squared is a perfect square. 64 is a perfect square. So I'm going to rewrite it as y equals x squared minus 8 squared. There's my bases. So I'm going to finish this out as x minus 8, x plus 8, which means my P is positive 8, and my Q is negative 8. If you want to put A in there as 1, you totally can. And that's it for 50. All right, 52 is exactly the same concept. So remember, if you don't like that f of x, you can scribble it out, write y. Or no matter what, it's just going to drop down. How do I get x squared? X and x. That's how I know my problem is going to look like this. X and x. Now, how do I get negative 45? Negative 1 and 45. Negative 2 doesn't work. Negative 3 and 15. That tells me to stop right there because that's 12. And if I have positive 12 and I want negative 12, I just switch both signs to positive 3 and negative 15. So I write plus 3, negative 15, which means my P is negative 3, my Q is 15, and I'm done. Alrighty, 54, y equals x squared plus 22x plus 121. Hopefully you know 121 is a perfect square. It's going to make your life easier. Even if you're not using the shortcut, still knowing that 11 and 11 gives you 121, it makes your life much easier. So I write this as x plus 11, and then I have y equals, my a is 1, my p is negative 11, my q is also negative 11. So that's it. Alright, 56, they have f of x equals x squared plus 6x minus 55. Remember, it says what are the zeros? P and Q are zeros. So when I find P and Q, I'm finding the zeros. So how do I get x squared? X and x. How do I get negative 55? I know 1 and negative 55 and 5 and negative 11. Now that gives me negative 6. So I'm going to make negative 5 and positive 11 to get positive 6. So I say f of x equals negative x minus 5, x plus 11. So my P and my Q are my zeros. P is positive 5, Q is negative 11. And that's it for 56. And I believe that's answer B, by the way. Alright, so in 58, they're just saying, what options could you have for the middle term if you have x squared and 7 to begin with? If you have x squared plus bx, that's a b, it's not a 6, it's a b. So they're saying, what letters could you let b equal? Well, x and x, that's not going to affect the middle, but you could have 1 and 7, which means your b could be 8. You could have negative 1 and negative 7, which is negative 8. There's no other ways to get 7, so your b can only be 8 or negative 8. That's it. Alright, so the whole area equals x to 84, so I know x plus 2 times x plus 7 has to equal 84. Now, I can't solve from here. I need to set it equal to 0. So step 1 is I have to FOIL, because I can't make it a 0 until after I FOIL. So I get x squared plus 7x plus 2x plus 14 equals 84. Now I can move my 84 over. So minus 84 from both sides. I add those two. I get plus 9x minus 70 equals 0. Now I can factor it. So I can say, how do I get negative 70? And I'm going to pick 14 and negative 5. Because that will give me negative 70, and I'm going to add it to be 9. So I have x plus 14, x minus 5 equals 0. Now that my parentheses equals 0, I can say x equals negative 14, x equals 5. Now I cross off x equals 14 because if I plug in negative 14 right there, it doesn't make it possible. So I plug in 5 and my dimensions become 7 by 12. And that's it. Alright, 62 is the area of a right trapezoid. If you don't know the formula, hopefully you know it's 1/2 times b1 plus b2, so the average of the bases, times the height. So I say area equals 1/2 x plus 6 plus x plus 2 times x. I end up with area equals 1/2 2x plus 12. So area equals x plus 12 times x. Now remember, in the problem, area is 32. So I distribute that. I have to subtract 32 to make it equal to 0. So now this is what I have to factor. I have x squared plus 12x minus 32 equals 0. So I factored x plus 8, x plus 4, so I get x equals negative 8, x equals negative 4. And that's it. So 66 will be accuracy and the 2 mistakes.